Hi, I'm Tim Ronak with Nobel Coatings, and I am a National Director for the SCRS, and today we're here to talk about adhesives. Adhesives are becoming a much larger part of the manufacturing ecosystem in the construction of vehicles, and in fact even in the repair of vehicles that have been originally assembled in a conventional manner. Now, with those adhesives, there's a tremendous amount of technology and chemistry in them. And to help us understand kind of how these can be used is Toby Chess. Toby, why is this becoming such a difficult thing for people to grasp?
Well, traditionally, like you said, we've been welding quarter panels on.
Agreed.
And when you start welding, you create heat. Heat does a number of things. It weakens the metal in the surrounding area where you weld. It also leads to opening up the metal for corrosion. If we can eliminate that from our process and have another type of attachment that will eliminate it, we'll go that route. Understand about adhesives, they have great, what we call tensile strength. They're going to, takes a lot of pressure to pull them apart. It also needs a lot of area. So it takes a lot of strength. So we have these adhesives for that particular movement. We're now combining them either with welds or with rivets to prevent shearing, because shearing will move this way. And we don't want it to move, because once we start with that, it'll break the bond for the adhesive. So it's usually a combination of both that we're seeing in today's market. If you have an older, let's say a 2011 BMW 3 Series and you need to replace a quarter panel, you need to put it on with rivets and glue. If you weld it in, you have the potential of having the car's corrosion protection warranty voided. And then we'll go even more extreme is that you might even have to buy that car back. So understand what it does. When you put adhesives down, it does a number of things. First off, besides the strength, you're coating the whole surface. So now you have like a primer over the whole surface with adhesives. Number two, when you have two pieces of metal, they could create a vibration between it. By adding a coat of adhesive, it acts as a cushion, so it quiets it down. And again, it's a fairly easy process to put on. You need to follow what your OEs say. Some say you will use this type of adhesive. It's been tested, and that it is what we want on our cars.
I think that's an important point. Again, certain manufacturers will provide either an aftermarket adhesive or maybe give you 2 or 3 aftermarket adhesives that meet that specification you can choose from, whereas certain manufacturers, and many of the time it's the German, European manufacturers, are requiring adhesives that you have to purchase through the dealer parts department. There's no aftermarket adhesive that meets that spec. They've had an adhesive produced to meet their spec, and they distribute that. And so some of the things that we've seen just in the shop environment, also being involved with post-repair inspections, is there are a lot of cases where maybe a Volkswagen or BMW or Mercedes is being repaired and that specified adhesive for that manufacturer wasn't used. Instead, we used a generic 3M adhesive or a Ken adhesive or something like that wasn't necessarily designed for or approved by that manufacturer. Talk about kind of the dangers a shop would maybe get into by just putting any type of adhesive in there rather than what the manufacturer is actually specifying.
So your adhesives that we're using on panels all have little glass beads in it. And what it does is creates a bond line thickness. So it doesn't clamp when you clamp it down, those glass beads will stop it from actually metal to metal and give that nice little thickness in there. If you're using a cheaper adhesive that doesn't have that glass bead in there and you press it down, you will have a problem where all the adhesive pops out of the...
Sure. So the glass beads allow it to keep just enough adhesive in the bond to ensure you haven't squeezed out too much and there's nothing.
There are some shims out there, but again, most guys don't have the technical expertise to really use those. They were taught how to use it, that's fine, but nobody's teaching it. But I will add this. Again, when you look at the training aspects, ADH01 from ICAR is an adhesive class, and they go through all the various classifications, understanding what kind of failures you can have. Had a shop, they put on a quarter panel, painted it, and then put the glue over the top of it, and the rear window flew out when it got hit. What happened is that the adhesive didn't bond to that material in there, and you had an adhesion.
Sure, a failure.
Sometimes if you use an outdated adhesive, it won't all stick, and then you have another adhesion problem.
So an expired adhesive.
You need to have education on this stuff, just slap an adhesive on. One other thing is that I've seen in shops, these guys sit there and they put the adhesive on and they want to move it, they lift it off. Well, what happens when you lift it off, Kye?
Well, obviously it compromises the repair.
Compromises the thing. I mean, you got to slide it.
Right.
We tell them all night, slide it. Then you see the guy pulling it off and pushing it back.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to back up a minute and talk about why adhesives are so popular today and why we're here talking about the different processes. Adhesives work great in joining different materials together. And with the light of manufacturers trying to lighten their vehicles, the aftermarket that we're in are noticing a lot of composites being used and things like aluminum, light steel, and the manufacturers are finding that they can create a bond path consistently in the manufacturing process to duplicate a consistent product that can be heated and cured, that they can test. And that's why it's so important that when you're doing a repair on these type of materials, that a product that has been tested to work within that parameter be used.
Right. So at the factory level, if they're installing these panels with adhesive, they've essentially rendered them not salvageable to be reused on cars in the future if that vehicle gets damaged.
Tim, I would go farther and say, if you had a vehicle that, go back to the BMW, somebody bought a used one, how are they going to get off the spot welds? They're going to drill them all out, but it's put on with glue and glue in here. There's no way you can do it that way.
Right, and that's some of the metals today. By removing the panel, you've destroyed it because you're not allowed to remove material.
So with adhesive, let's talk about, we've talked a little bit about kind of what adhesives are and why they're used so much. Let's talk about, the application considerations. I think, first and foremost, we talked about looking to what the OE says. Do they approve an aftermarket adhesive? Do they require their own? One of the things I think is overlooked commonly, some of these manufacturers actually don't want you removing the E-coat from that replacement panel. They want you to either wipe it down with a type of a solvent cleaner, maybe lightly abrade it, whereas some manufacturers, both on maybe the vehicle side or the adhesive side, actually want you to remove that E-coat and have the panel bare metal when that adhesive is applied.
Well, I will go this route. I don't think that any of them say bare metal. But either you're going to put a Pyrosil primer down or some sort of liquid primer on there. The E-coat will act as a primer. If they tell you to go on a bare metal, then you're going to put a coat of adhesive down and spread it out, and then another coat over the top of it. I think they all want some sort of barrier coat between the two pieces of metal.
Right, but the preparation, before that, it does vary because you may sometimes be removing that, you may not, and that's an important.
Again, go back to how does your OE tell you to put that on?
Correct.
Yeah, different OEs are different. Some of them, like if you're dealing with aluminum, they want you to completely take the E-coat off and use some type of Pyrosil or some kind of alcohol to clean all the moisture off before you apply the adhesive. Some you have to primer before putting the adhesive on. Again, it's all product specific and OEM specific. So that's the key element. Be careful when you substitute a product, in place of what an OEM recommendation is.
So if you have the panel off and you've got the residue of the adhesive of the panel that was originally adhesived onto the car, how do you remove that adhesive?
We in our shop, we use like a Scotch-Brite pad that's on a air drill,
Okay.
They come in.
So a wheel.
Different, exactly, and you slowly remove it until you get back to the original substrate.
And those manufacturers are, you know, they're also pretty specific in, you know, they understand on the body flanges, that's almost always going to be some sort of bare metal because you're having to clean off that old adhesive. So where they may tell you, you know, prepare this, you know, one way because we know it's going to be bare metal, that don't remove the E-coat from, you know, the new panel. Just wipe it down or lightly abrade it or whatever it may be. So it, you know, it varies again based on vehicle manufacturer and adhesive manufacturer. Everybody's kind of got their own requirements, but I think the important thing here is that the technician can't just go to the adhesive cabinet and grab a tube of adhesive and all right, let's go. You know, some research needs to take place before, not only on what the OE requires, but you know, once you get that adhesive number, you know, let's look at the tech sheet. And most all those adhesives come with the tech sheets. They're in the packaging or they're readily available on the manufacturer's website. And what are the things a technician's going to find in a tech sheet?
Does it need a primer? What is the work time? What's your clamping time? What's your, how long do you have to until it's fully cured?
And at what temperature?
Yeah, correct. Temperature is very important with these. It's probably the major things that you're looking for. Personal protection equipment, we need to be concerned with isocyanates. So respirators, goggles, gloves need to be worn with these materials. Also when removing it. If you heat it up, you get it too hot, toxic gases come off. So.
Right.
Something to consider too during the cure time, as Toby mentioned. You know, you have to plan on the repair sitting in a stall during that cure time. So it's not something you want to do in a high traffic area. You know, the complete cross-link of the components will not be done to hold that panel securely until that cure time has been reached. So it can be accelerated with heat. You can wait with normal air dry, but again, pay specific attention to the manufacturer's recommendation.
So if you've got a vehicle set up on a repair bench and you're performing a structural replacement in conjunction with adhesives, you don't want to get it welded back on and have a cure time of 12 or 24 hours and just roll it off the machine, you know, 30 minutes later. It's important to let it fully cure, you know, before you remove it.
So part of that adhesive plan, does it involve coordinating manpower and roles?
Exactly. Like, I'll give you a classic example. Because of the work time, as Toby mentioned, the factors are temperature and weather. You can buy different adhesives that have a different cure rate. Colder climates, hotter climates. What's nice is to have you know, more than one technician and to do a pre-planned installation. So everybody has a job. Everybody goes through a routine of pre-fitting a panel and what their duties are. Protection around not only yourself for safety, as Toby mentioned, but the vehicle, the floor, account for any type of dripping. And then you do a dry run. So everybody knows what their time allotment is. And then if you're able to attach that part or panel within the parameter of the cure time, or I should say the work time, then you know you're going to be successful in putting that panel together.
Right, right. Because once you start running out of materials, if you get half of the opening adhesive and you don't happen to have enough to do the rest, you really have to start over.
Yeah, that's part of the pre-planning part of it.
Right.
Well, and that's another reason why it's so important to test fit. You know, if you don't test fit that panel, you apply all the adhesive and set it on there and something doesn't fit, and you have to pull the panel back off to remove it, well, you've compromised all the adhesive that was on there. So you're having to clean all that back off, reapply your beads and all that. So that's an important aspect of, you know, when there's a panel that requires adhesive, whether it be in conjunction with weld bonding or rivet bonding, you know, additional time considerations are usually going to be required to test fit that panel.
And go a step farther is that it would not be an included item and that you would need to sit there and have a separate line item. I'd like to...
For test fit.
Yeah. You know, SCRS has on its website in the middle of the page 20 pages of non-included items I think that if there is a section on adhesives.
Yeah, there absolutely is, and that's what Toby's referring to. It's the SCRS Guide to Complete Repair Planning. Again, you can find it on the website at scrs.com.
Great tool to have in there because there's items that you need to look at that aren't included in that process.
And cars are changing, you know, and being a consumer as well as coming from the industry, just the thought of cars being glued together, you know, in the eyes of consumers, it seems simple. I mean, I can crazy glue my coffee mug. I can, you know, JB Weld was a part of me growing up. If you had to make a part, and today's cars with the technology that's evolved in these adhesives has gone far beyond just a simple task. Not only do you have different materials recommended by manufacturers, the methodology used by each of the manufacturers, according to what Michael said, changes dramatically from one manufacturer to another, which pushes all of this back to the only real resource you can use is going back to the manufacturer and saying, if I'm going to adhesive this panel on, what do I need to do? And that really needs to be your roadmap for what you need to do.
That's spot on, Tim. A position statement by the manufacturer is the key element here. For those that do provide it, it is your Bible basically to ensure that that's a safe repair. You know, what you've alluded to as far as cars being glued together, not only have they provided a means of attaching items together, but they've made vehicles safer today, lighter today, but unfortunately it makes the repair more complicated.
Absolutely.
Today.
And maybe glued is the wrong word, you know, because that dumbifies how they're constructed, because it is a technological masterpiece the way these cars are put together with the adhesives and the way they're bonded.
Adhesive bonding, not glued.
Exactly. So I have to be careful on the terminology.
I think one other quick point are the repair considerations of your exterior panels when there's adhesives in the area. You know, I think iCars published something that once an adhesive gets over, I believe, 400 degrees, it degrades. It starts to degrade and weaken. So, you know, you're dealing with an area, maybe it's a rocker panel, quarter panel, where those parts are adhesively bonded from the factory, and you start to weld stud pins, you know, in those areas, and those stud pins, 1,500 to 2,000 degrees in certain instances, and, you know, you're degrading the adhesive around that area, and in some cases breaking that bond. So I think it's something, you know, as repairers, we kind of, not only do we need to know the adhesives when we're replacing the panel, we've got to know where the adhesives are when we're repairing those exterior panels. And, you know, the issue there is if we degrade that bond or we break that bond altogether, there's not a way to replace that bond without removing the panel, you know, and starting anew. So that's obviously a big repair consideration that I think sometimes is lost within many in the industry.
And so how susceptible are those adhesives? Like a wheel opening, a common injury on a car is a quarter panel wheel opening, and I know a lot of wheel openings on modern cars are adhesive bonded right along that wheel opening. Using heat or not, if that thing gets hit and they start to work between the inner fender panel and the quarter, if it got bent and you bend it back, does it crack the adhesive?
Well, again, speaking from the post-repair inspection side of things, I know we've looked at a lot of cars that have had repaired quarter panels, and be it the adhesive is you know, been burnt because of the heat applied from the weld pins, or because that wheelhouse and outer quarter panel was damaged and that broke the bond, the impact. You know, you look at a lot and the bond in there is broken when you go inside it with a borescope. Okay. And then, you know, we've also done some tests where we've welded pins to, you know, outer door panels where, you know, those panels have already been deemed unrepairable, but where it's ignited the foam or the adhesive, you know, within the door skin panel. And so again, that's something that we don't always like to think about because we don't look inside of things. As long as the exterior looks good, everything else must be good. But again, that is to me a tremendous consideration that is just overlooked very often.
And today, technology's changed. We've got borescopes. People can go re-inspect this, and
Correct.
Repairers today need to be aware that at any point in the future, a car that they fixed, if they fail to look inside or do all the steps to properly repair it, may have some challenges down the road. Today we talked about a lot of information about adhesives, and With all of that we covered, several things came out that were important. One, follow the OE recommendations. That is one of the key resources for you to be able to put these vehicles back to their original state. Two, there are different adhesives. You need to make sure you use the correct one for the correct purpose, and that even though you're not going to be panel bonding, if a panel got damaged somewhere near some of this adhesive material, there may be some concerns that you may have down the road due to a post-repair inspection. Be sure that you look at all of the consequences as you go through and create your repair plan to do this. If you would like to support SCRS in its endeavors, you can go ahead and join SCRS by going to the SCRS website at scrs.com, where you can find other information on topics similar to this that can be of benefit to you and your organization.